The first rays of dawn spilled through the thin curtains of a one-room house in the outskirts of Nakuru town. Outside, the world was already awake. Roosters crowing, vendors shouting, and the smell of wood smoke curling through the narrow alleyways. Inside, Nia Kamau sat silently at the edge of her bed, clutching a letter that trembled in her hand. It was a dismissal notice. After 6 years of working as a housekeeper for the wealthy Otieno family, she was being replaced. Nothing personal, the letter had said. Just business. No severance. No thanks. Just a single folded sheet and the echo of a slammed door. Nia had been their shadow, waking before sunrise, washing their dishes until her fingers cracked, caring for their children, polishing silver that was worth more than her entire neighborhood. Every month she had promised her mother, "Next time, Mama, I'll send more." Now there would be no next time. She set the letter down beside a framed photo of her daughter Zawadi, a smiling 8-year-old who thought her mother worked in a big office. Nia smiled faintly at the thought. It was easier to let Zawadi dream. "I can't break today," she whispered to herself. "She's counting on me." The morning bustle of the slum streets met her as she stepped outside. Women balancing basins on their heads, children chasing a plastic ball, the hum of life refusing to stop even for despair. Nia's shoes, long torn at the edges, splashed through puddles left by last night's rain. She walked toward the city center, where the buildings grew taller and the air smelled of exhaust and ambition. Everywhere she turned, help wanted signs dangled behind locked gates. Most jobs required education or references she didn't have. At a corner cafe, a woman in a crisp uniform wiped tables. Nia watched her for a moment, the steady rhythm of movement, the faint smile as customers came and went. She thought, that could be me. Inside, she asked timidly if there was an opening. The manager, a man with polished shoes and impatient eyes, looked her over. "Experience?" "Yes, sir. I've cleaned and cooked for 6 years." "Any papers? Letters?" "No, sir." "Then I'm sorry. We only hire certified staff." The words struck harder than intended. Certified, as if worth could be stamped or signed. By afternoon, hunger began to whisper. She had skipped breakfast to save her last coins. Passing a bakery, she paused at the window where golden loaves lined the shelves like treasure. The smell was warm and cruel. A small boy outside was crying. His balloon had floated into the sky. Nia knelt beside him and smiled. "Sometimes things go away," she said softly, "so that better ones can find us." The boy sniffled and nodded. His mother thanked her quietly before they left. That tiny exchange, a smile, a kind word, was enough to steady Nia's heart again. She walked on until the sun began to set behind the hills. At a construction site she saw a sign, "Cleaning help needed, apply inside." Her pulse quickened. Inside the half-built complex, a foreman looked up. "You want to work here? It's heavy labor. Long hours. I can handle it. Pay is small. Small is still something." He studied her for a moment, then handed her a torn notebook page with an address. "Come tomorrow. We start early." That night, back in her room, Nia placed the note beside her daughter's photo. For the first time that day, she let herself cry, not from sadness but from relief. She whispered a prayer of thanks, even for the smallest chance. The candle beside her flickered low. "Tomorrow," she said to herself, "I start again." As the wind sighed through the cracks in the wall, her eyes closed, carrying with them the image of her daughter's smile, the one light that never went out. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Nia Kamau tied her headscarf and stepped out of her house. The air was cold, thick with the scent of wet soil and charcoal fires. A rooster crowed somewhere in the distance, echoing through the narrow streets like a call to battle. She walked briskly toward the bus stop, her steps splashing through puddles left by the dawn dew. The city lights faded slowly as the morning glow took their place, and with each passing block, Nia whispered a silent prayer. "Let this day be kind. Let them see my worth." The construction site was already alive with noise. Men shouting, metal clanging, trucks reversing with shrill beeps. Dust floated in the air, glittering faintly in the morning sun. A foreman with a helmet too big for his head spotted her. "You the new one?" "Yes, sir." "Nia. Good. You'll be cleaning the site floors, fetching water and scrubbing equipment. We start at 6, end at sunset. Lunch is on you." Nia nodded, adjusting her old sandals. She grabbed a broom almost as tall as she was and began sweeping, each stroke raising clouds of red earth that coated her clothes and skin. Men walked past carrying steel rods and cement bags, barely noticing her. Some laughed, others whistled, but none offered a hand. By mid-morning, sweat had darkened her blouse. Her palms stung from blisters, and her throat was dry. She found a corner with a bit of shade and sat down for a moment, wiping her brow with the back of her arm. That's when she noticed someone watching her, a young mason named Eli. He was tall, with a kind face half hidden beneath a dusty cap. "First day?" he asked. "Yes," she said, forcing a smile. "You'll get used to the dust. It's part of the uniform here. Then I'll wear it with pride." Eli chuckled softly and handed her a bottle of water. "Drink. You'll need your strength." The water was warm and metallic, but it felt like a gift. Hours passed. Nia scrubbed, lifted, swept, and carried. Her muscles screamed, but her spirit whispered, "Keep going." She thought of her daughter, Zawadi, waiting for school fees that hadn't been paid in months. Every bucket of water she carried was another promise to that little girl. When the day ended, her legs trembled. The foreman handed her a small brown envelope. "First pay. Don't expect much." She opened it and counted. 200 shillings. Barely enough for a meal and transport. Still, her eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. He frowned. "Don't thank me. You earned it." She smiled faintly. Maybe he didn't mean to be kind, but the words mattered anyway. That night, Nia returned home covered in dust. She stood in front of a cracked mirror, washing her face with cold water. Each drop revealed a bit more of her tired smile. In the background, the radio played an old gospel song. "After the storm comes the calm." She looked at her reflection and whispered, "Maybe I'm still in the storm. But one day I'll see the calm." Then she sat at the edge of her bed, pulled out a small notebook and wrote the date. Day 1. New beginning. Dust and all. She tucked the notebook beneath her pillow and closed her eyes, feeling a small spark of peace. For the first time in months, the fear of tomorrow didn't haunt her. Because this time she wasn't waiting for rescue. She was building her own way out, brick by brick, breath by breath. The days blended together. Sunrise, work, dust, exhaustion, and the long walk home. For Nia Kamau, every morning felt the same. The taste of salt on her lips from sweat, the ache in her back, the sting in her hands. But every evening, as she lay on her thin mattress, she felt one thing growing stronger: resolve. She wasn't just working for survival anymore. She was working for dignity. The construction site was busier than ever. The company had won a big contract, and the foremen were pushing everyone harder. Men shouted orders, machines roared. The air buzzed with impatience. Nia kept her head down, moving like clockwork. Sweeping, lifting, fetching, scrubbing, again and again, like a rhythm she could never escape. One morning, as she bent to scrub the concrete floor, she heard laughter behind her. "Hey, Nia," one of the younger workers called out. "How come you work so hard for such little pay? You think they'll make you manager someday?" The men around him laughed. Nia didn't look up. "Maybe I just respect what feeds me," she said softly. The laughter faded, replaced by silence. Even Eli, who was stacking bricks nearby, looked up, a hint of admiration in his eyes. But not everyone liked her calm strength. Later that day, the site supervisor, a broad man named Mr. Kaib, approached her with his usual frown. "You again," he muttered. "You're sweeping the wrong section." "I told you. I was assigned this corridor, sir," she interrupted politely. His brows knit together. "You don't correct me, woman. You do what I say." She lowered her gaze. Yes, sir. But her hands kept moving, her posture steady, unbroken. And that quiet confidence seemed to bother him more than defiance ever could. That afternoon the foreman called a meeting. Everyone gathered under the half-built scaffolding. Listen up, he barked. Tomorrow we'll be visited by the company's investors. The site must look perfect. Clean floors, polished tools, no mistakes. Whoever messes up loses their job. Murmurs rippled through the workers. Nia felt her heart thump. Losing this job would mean losing everything. When everyone dispersed, she stayed behind, scrubbing the floors long after the others had left. Eli came back, shaking his head. Nia, you'll wear yourself out. If I do my best, she said quietly, maybe the dust will finally respect me. He smiled faintly. You sound like someone who's been fighting all her life. Maybe I have. The next morning the investors arrived. Clean suits, sunglasses, shiny shoes. They walked through the site, pointing and murmuring. Nia stood by with her broom, watching silently as they inspected her section. One of the men turned to Mr. Kaib. The floors here are spotless. Who cleaned this area? Mr. Kaib smirked. My team did, sir. Nia's fingers tightened around the broom. She didn't speak, but her eyes burned. When the men left, she turned back to her work, feeling the familiar sting of invisibility. That evening, Eli found her sitting alone near the gate, staring at her hands. You should have said something, he said. And what would that change? She replied. If I speak, I lose my job. If I stay silent, I lose myself. He didn't answer because he knew she was right. When Nia got home, she found her daughter, Zawadi, waiting with a school notebook. Mama, we were asked to write about heroes, the girl said eagerly. I wrote about you. Me. Nia laughed softly. I'm not a hero. Yes, you are, Zawadi insisted. Because heroes don't give up, even when no one helps them. Nia hugged her tightly. Her daughter's words washed away a day's worth of bitterness. She whispered against her hair. Maybe one day, people will see what you already see. Outside, the moon rose over the rusted rooftops, bathing the city in silver light. And for the first time in a long time, Nia smiled. Not because her life had become easier, but because she knew her story was still being written. The days grew hotter. The dust hung thick in the air like smoke, clinging to skin and lungs. The clang of steel, the groan of engines, and the constant shouting of orders became Nia's world, a rhythm of survival that never slowed. She worked quietly, steadily, the same way every day. No one noticed the woman behind the clean floors and shining tools, but without her, the site would have fallen into chaos. Still, silence had a cost. One afternoon, as the workers broke for lunch, Nia sat alone under a half-built scaffold, unwrapping a small packet of maize and beans. The food was cold, but she ate it gratefully. Across the yard, she saw Mr. Kaib laughing with another supervisor, counting stacks of cash. A whisper of resentment fluttered in her chest, not jealousy, but the sting of unfairness. She hadn't been paid in 3 weeks. That evening, as the site emptied and the sun bled into the horizon, she walked to Kaib's office, knocking softly on the metal door. Sir. Yes, he replied without looking up. Please, about my pay. I haven't received anything for the last 3 weeks. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. There's been a delay. Be patient. But sir, my rent is due and my child. Do you think you're the only one struggling? He snapped. If you don't like it, leave. Her lips trembled, but she stayed still. I only ask for what I've earned. Earned? His voice rose. You people always talk like the world owes you something. You're lucky to have a job at all. He tossed a few coins on the table. Barely enough for transport. Take it or leave it. Nia stared at the coins. Her throat tightened. But she didn't pick them up. I won't beg for what's mine, she said softly. Then don't expect to work here much longer, he sneered. She turned and left, heart pounding. Outside, the air was heavy with heat and humiliation. That night, she sat by the small kerosene lamp in her room. Her daughter, Zawadi, was asleep beside her, breathing softly. Nia watched her chest rise and fall and felt a tear slide down her cheek. "How do I tell her there might not be food tomorrow?" she whispered. The walls seemed to close in, the silence pressing against her like a weight. She took out her notebook, the one where she wrote her small hopes and promises, and opened it. Inside were pages filled with quiet dreams. Buy Zawadi a new school dress. Save enough for a sewing machine. Find work that doesn't break my back. Her tears fell onto the ink, smudging the words. That night she prayed, not for miracles but for strength. "Lord, I can bear hunger. I can bear tiredness. But don't let me lose faith." The next morning she arrived at the site early, broom in hand, determined to keep going, until she saw a new face sweeping her section. "Who are you?" she asked. "New hire," the woman replied. "They told me you were dismissed." Nia froze. Dismissed. She rushed to Kaib's office. "Sir, there must be a mistake. You said nothing yesterday." "You were disrespectful," he said flatly. "We don't need that kind of attitude here." "But sir, leave the premises. Now." The words cut through her like glass. She stepped outside, her body trembling. The sight that had been her only hope now stood like a stranger before her. No one looked at her. Not even Eli, who stood across the yard, his eyes full of silent helplessness. She walked slowly to the gate. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time she reached home, the sky had darkened with rain clouds. Thunder rumbled above. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall as the first drops began to fall. Then something inside her, something small but fierce, refused to break. She stood up, took her broom, and leaned it against the door. "If they won't see my worth," she whispered, "I'll show it to the world myself." She didn't know how yet. But she knew one thing. She would no longer depend on people who saw her as replaceable. Outside, the rain came down in sheets. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating her face. Tired, yes, but unbroken. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling but strong. "They took my job. But they didn't take me." And in that stormy night something changed. Not in the world around her, but inside her heart. The kind of change that doesn't ask permission. It builds itself quietly out of pain. The next morning, Nia woke to the sound of birds outside her window, faint and distant, almost mocking in their freedom. The sun had risen, but her world still felt gray. Her rent was due, her cupboards nearly empty, and her job gone. She sat on the small stool beside her bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Zawadi stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, are we going to school today?" Nia forced a smile. "Of course, my flower. You must never miss school." She dressed her daughter carefully, smoothing the wrinkles from her old uniform, tying the faded ribbons in her hair. As she watched Zawadi leave for school, her chest ached with both pride and pain. When the door closed, silence returned, heavy and endless. That afternoon, Nia walked through the streets of Kibera, the largest slum in Nairobi, searching for work. Her feet ached and her throat was dry, but she kept walking. She stopped by shops, small stalls, construction sites. Always the same answer. "We're not hiring. Come back next month." "Sorry, we already have someone." Each rejection chipped at her hope. By evening, she found herself sitting by the road, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Cars sped by, splashing muddy water onto her skirt, but she didn't move. She stared at the horizon, the place where the city's tall buildings met the darkening sky, and whispered, "There must be a way. There has to be." The next day, while helping her neighbor, Mama Ruth, clean up her small tailoring shop, Nia noticed something. A broken sewing machine pushed into the corner. "It doesn't work anymore," Nia asked. "It needs fixing," Mama Ruth sighed. "Costs more than I can afford." Nia ran her hand over the machine, brushing away dust. "Maybe I can fix it." Mama Ruth raised an eyebrow. "You know how. My mother taught me a little before she passed." That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Nia sat on the floor with a screwdriver and a small lamp. Her fingers worked carefully, remembering old lessons, adjusting wires, tightening bolts. Sweat dripped down her face, and the dim light flickered, but she didn't stop. Hours passed. Then, when she pressed the pedal, the needle moved. Slow, shaky, but alive. The machine worked. Mama Ruth gasped. "You did it!" Nia smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't much, but it felt like life returning. From that day forward, Nia began repairing torn clothes for her neighbors. At first, just a few small jobs. A ripped school uniform, a frayed curtain, a worn-out jacket. They paid her with coins, sometimes with food, sometimes with gratitude. But slowly her name spread. "That woman Nia, she can fix anything." She began to earn a little. Enough for rice, for Zawadi's schoolbooks, for hope. Every evening, as she stitched under the glow of her kerosene lamp, her fingers moved like rhythm, her heart steady. Each thread she pulled felt like she was sewing herself back together, piece by piece. One night, as Zawadi did her homework beside her, she looked up and said, "Mama, when I grow up, I want to be like you." Nia paused. "Like me?" "Yes. Strong." Those words hit deeper than any insult ever could. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from sadness. Days turned into weeks. The sound of the sewing machine became the heartbeat of their small home. It wasn't perfect. The machine still jammed sometimes, money was tight, and life was hard, but it was hers. One evening, Mama Ruth came running in. "Nia, there's a wedding next week. They need someone to alter 10 dresses. I told them about you." Nia's eyes widened. 10 dresses? Yes. They'll pay well. Nia felt her breath catch. It was the biggest job she'd ever been offered. Fear whispered in her ear. "What if you fail?" But something stronger answered. "What if you don't?" She looked at her old sewing machine, the one she'd brought back from the dead, and whispered, "Let's begin." That night, as rain tapped softly against the window, Nia worked late into the night. Each stitch was a prayer, each dress a step toward something new. And though her hands were blistered and her eyes heavy, she smiled through it all. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was building. Morning sunlight poured gently through the patched curtains of Nia's small home. The hum of her old sewing machine filled the air. Steady, strong, and alive, like a heartbeat she'd built with her own hands. On the wooden table beside her lay 10 beautiful dresses, neatly folded, each one a piece of her soul stitched into fabric. Zawadi stood by, holding a spool of golden thread. "Mama, these are the prettiest dresses I've ever seen." "You helped my flower," Nia said softly. "Beauty grows where love lives." She packed the dresses carefully into a basket, wrapped in brown paper. Her heart pounded. This was her biggest order yet. Her chance to prove she could stand on her own. When she reached the client's home, a grand white-painted villa in the wealthy part of town, she hesitated at the gate. 2 guards stood by, their eyes cold, their gaze lingering on her skin, her old shoes, the basket in her hands. "Delivery?" one of them asked. "Yes," she said, steadying her voice. "For Madame Wanjiru." They exchanged looks but let her in. Inside, the marble floors gleamed, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. Nia's heart raced, not from fear but from awe. Madame Wanjiru, a tall woman in her 50s dressed in bright gold jewelry, appeared from the hallway. She looked at Nia, then at the dresses. "You made all these?" "Yes, madam." Impressive." She lifted one dress, examined the seams, ran her fingers along the hem. Then she smiled. "You have talent, girl. Real talent." Nia's chest swelled with pride. Madame Wanjiru called her daughter, who tried one of the dresses, and it fit perfectly. "You see," Madame said. "She's good. Better than half these tailors in town." Then she turned to Nia. "How much do I owe you?" Nia hesitated. Money was always a delicate topic. "The total is 6,000 shillings. Madame raised an eyebrow. That's too little for this work." I'll give you 8,000. Nia froze. 8? Yes. And maybe next time I'll pay more, if you agree to work exclusively for me. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the money. Thank you, madam. That evening, when Nia returned home, Zawadi ran into her arms. They cooked together, rice, vegetables, and even a small piece of fish. It wasn't much, but it tasted like victory. For the first time in years, they laughed freely. But deep inside, Nia knew this was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Madame Wanjiru called again. Nia, I have a big order. 10 uniforms for my boutique staff. But I need them in 3 days. Nia's heart skipped. That was an impossible deadline. 3 days. Madam, You'll manage. I'll pay double. The temptation was heavy. Double pay. Enough to fix her roof, buy a new sewing machine, maybe even send Zawadi to a better school. She agreed. I'll do it, madam. For the next 3 days, Nia barely slept. She stitched through the night, her fingers raw and bleeding. She drank water instead of tea to stay awake. The machine sputtered, but she whispered, Don't give up on me now. Zawadi tried to help, bringing her mother pieces of cloth, humming quietly to keep her awake. The little girl's voice was the only light in those long nights. Finally, on the 3rd night, just before dawn, the last button was sewn. Nia looked at the uniforms. Perfectly lined, neat, flawless. She smiled faintly, exhaustion washing over her like a wave. When she delivered them the next morning, Madame Wanjiru was impressed. You've done beautifully again, she said. Then, leaning closer, she added, Listen, I'm opening a second boutique. I want you to manage all tailoring, but... She paused, lowering her voice. You'll need to undercut the other seamstresses. Don't tell them what I pay you. And if you're asked to copy their designs, you do it quietly. Nia blinked. Her joy turned to unease. Madam, I don't think. Don't think. Just do. You want to grow, don't you? Nia stood still. The words echoed in her head. You want to grow. Yes, she did, but not like this. Not by betraying others who were struggling like her. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry, madam. I can't do that. Madam's smile vanished. Then perhaps I've made a mistake hiring you. Nia walked home under the scorching sun, her heart heavy, but her soul light. She had chosen integrity over comfort. She had lost a job, but kept her dignity. That evening she sat outside her home, watching Zawadi draw flowers in the dirt. A soft breeze passed through the alley, carrying the scent of rain. And in that moment Nia knew. Her story was still being written. Each choice, each act of courage was another thread of destiny. The rains came early that year. Thick gray clouds hung low over the rooftops, swallowing the city in a heavy silence. Nia sat by her sewing table, watching raindrops race down the windowpane. Her little shop, a small wooden stall she'd built beside her home, was filled with dresses, fabric rolls, and the faint smell of cotton and kerosene. She had finally begun to stand on her feet again. After Madame Wanjiru had cut her off, local women started bringing their clothes directly to Nia. They trusted her, not just her work, but her heart. Nia, one of them said, you don't cheat, you don't gossip, and you care. That's why we come to you. Those words became her strength. Every stitch she made was a promise, that no matter what happened she would never give up. That afternoon, as the rain turned into a storm, she closed the stall early. The wind howled through the narrow alleys, slamming doors and shaking windows. Zawadi sat on the floor, drawing under candlelight. Mama, will the rain stop soon? Yes, my flower, Nia whispered, wrapping her shawl tighter. It always does. Outside, thunder rumbled. Then crack. A loud noise echoed through the street. Nia ran to the door. A neighbor shouted, Fire! Fire at the end of the lane. Her heart dropped. The flames were spreading fast, roofs made of tin and wood catching like paper. And then she saw it. Her stall, her life's work, was on fire. Nia ran into the rain, ignoring the shouts around her. Water poured from the sky, but it couldn't fight the inferno. She tried to reach her shop, but the heat pushed her back. "Nia, no!" Mama Ruth cried, grabbing her arm. "It's too dangerous." Nia screamed, tears mixing with the rain. All her fabric, her tools, the machine she'd repaired with her own hands, everything was turning to ash. She fell to her knees, her voice lost in the storm. For the first time in years, she felt truly defeated. Why, God? Why now? The storm raged on, as if the heavens themselves were weeping with her. By morning, only blackened wood and smoke remained. Nia stood before the ruins, silent. Zawadi held her hand, trembling. "Mama, will we fix it?" Nia didn't answer right away. Her throat was tight. Then she knelt down, looking her daughter in the eyes. "Yes, my flower. We will." Days passed in silence. Neighbors brought what they could. Old cloth, spare thread, a small chair, a cup of tea. They couldn't give her much, but their kindness was a flame that refused to go out. One afternoon, a young woman approached her, well-dressed, carrying a camera and notebook. "Are you Nia?" "Yes," Nia said softly. "I'm Amina. I write for Voices of Nairobi. I heard about the fire. And about what you've done for this community." Nia blinked, surprised. "Me? Yes. People say you've helped many women. Fixed clothes for free, taught them stitching, cared for their children. I want to tell your story." Nia hesitated. She'd never thought of herself as someone worth writing about. I just do what I can." "Exactly," Amina smiled. "That's why it matters." A week later, the article was published. Nia of Kibera, the woman who stitched hope. Her photo, standing among the ashes of her stall, holding her daughter's hand, smiling faintly through the pain, appeared on the front page. People across Nairobi read it. Messages began pouring in. Some offered to donate fabric, others old machines, some even money. One message stood out. "We would like to support Nia's new tailoring shop. Please contact our foundation." It was signed by the Umoja Women's Initiative, a non-profit organization supporting small businesses run by women. Nia's hands trembled as she read it. She looked at Zawadi, tears filling her eyes. This time, tears of gratitude. "The storm broke us," she whispered. "But maybe, it also cleared the sky." Weeks later, Nia stood outside her new shop. The sign read, "Zawadi's Creations, Tailoring by Nia." The walls were freshly painted. The sewing machine was new. The room smelled of fabric, hope, and new beginnings. Neighbors gathered around, clapping and cheering. Mama Ruth hugged her tightly. "You see, child, the fire didn't destroy you. It revealed who you are." Nia smiled, looking at the sign, then at the sky, calm and golden after the storm. "Everything stitched together," she whispered, "was once torn apart." The morning sun bathed the narrow streets of Kibera in soft gold. A gentle wind carried the smell of fresh bread and the laughter of children running barefoot. In the heart of the community stood a small shop painted in warm orange and cream. Its sign read proudly, "Zawadi's Creations, Tailoring and Training by Nia." Inside, the rhythmic hum of sewing machines filled the room. Not one but 5 of them. 5 women worked side by side, stitching, measuring, and smiling. At the center of it all was Nia, her dark skin glowing in the morning light, her hair tied back in a colorful scarf, her eyes calm yet full of fire. She moved between the tables, helping a young apprentice fix a crooked seam. "Slow down," Nia said gently. "A strong stitch isn't rushed. It listens to the fabric." The girl smiled shyly. "Like you listen to us, Mama Nia." Nia chuckled softly. "Maybe. But I also listened to my mistakes. They taught me everything I know." It had been 6 months since the fire. 6 months of rebuilding, of faith, of community. The Umoja Women's Initiative had helped her reopen the shop, but Nia had added her own idea. A training program for young women in the neighborhood. "No woman should depend on someone who doesn't see her worth," Nia often said. "When you can create with your hands, you own your freedom." Every week, she taught girls how to cut patterns, mend clothes, and design dresses. She didn't charge a shilling. Just promise me, she'd tell them, that you'll teach another when you can. And they did. Word spread beyond Kibera. People from other parts of Nairobi came to order her clothes. Her designs began appearing in local markets. Bright African prints stitched with love, signed with a small tag. Made by Nia. One afternoon, Nia stood outside her shop, watching her students laughing as they worked. A car stopped nearby, a sleek black sedan. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, dressed in business attire. It was Amina, the journalist who'd written her story. "Nia," she called out, smiling. "It's been a while." "Amina, you found me again," Nia laughed, embracing her warmly. "I had to. The foundation that helped you. They've nominated you for the Women of Change Award." Nia froze. "Me? No, that can't be." "Oh, it can," Amina said with a grin. "You're changing lives, Nia. That's exactly what the award is for." Nia's heart pounded. She had never imagined that her name would be spoken anywhere beyond her street, yet here she was, being recognized for doing what she loved. A few weeks later, she stood on a small stage in Nairobi's City Hall. Her hands shook as she accepted the plaque that read, "Nia Achieng, for uplifting her community through courage, integrity, and compassion." The hall filled with applause. Cameras flashed. But Nia's eyes searched for one face. And there she was in the front row. Zawadi, smiling brighter than anyone else. When Nia stepped down, her daughter ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Mama, you did it." "No," Nia said softly, tears in her eyes. "We did it." That night, after the ceremony, Nia and Zawadi walked home together. The city lights shimmered and the air was cool. They passed by the old alley where her first stall had burned. It was now empty, but wildflowers grew where the ashes once lay. Nia stopped, kneeling to touch one of them. "You see this flower, Zawadi? It bloomed after the fire." "Like us," her daughter whispered. Nia smiled through her tears. "Yes, my flower. Like us." They walked on, hand in hand, the glow of the streetlights painting long shadows ahead. Two figures who had weathered every storm and still stood tall. Back in the shop the next morning, Nia hung her award on the wall. Below it, she placed an old, rusted needle, the first one she had used when repairing that broken sewing machine years ago. She looked at it with quiet pride. It was bent, dull, almost useless, but it reminded her where she came from. "Every wound teaches," she whispered. "Every thread connects." Then, as the sun rose higher and her students arrived, Nia smiled and said, "All right, my girls, let's begin. Today we sew a new dream."